Hello, Heidi Mendenhall, Executive Director of First Five Tehama, and I am here back with you for our second edition of our reading tip series. So if you haven't watched the first one, you can check it out on our First Five Tehama YouTube channel or find it on our website. We talked in the first one about 3 tips to support early reading that families can do, and teachers can do, or a neighbor can do with children. Today, we're going to dive closer into the second tip we talked about, which is around language. So language is actually a key factor in learning to read, and it's something that we can do, well, really before our babies even come out of our belly, right? We start talking to them so they can hear our words. So there's 3 things around language, 3 tips that you can do that I'm going to share with you today. Number 1 is around vocabulary, but specifically emotional vocabulary. So we know that the diversity of vocabulary children hear before the age of 2 actually can predict their ease of comprehension later on. And what that means is that we have the power from when they're very young to start flooding them with all different types of words. Now, emotional vocabulary is uniquely important because that helps them name their feelings in themselves and others, and helps them not only communicate what they're feeling, but communicate some of their problems. We find that kiddos that are in classrooms that have better communication are better able to attend in class, and they're better able to actually interact with their peers and learn more from them. So what does that mean? Emotional vocabulary are things like feeling names. So what are you feeling? You can do this when you're reading a book. You can notice on the picture what the character might be feeling by their facial expressions. Like, oh, look, her eyebrows are turned down. Ooh, that looks like she might be really angry. Or, oh, her mouth is open. That looks like she might be feeling surprised. And then you can connect it to a feeling that your child might have had. Do you remember when you were surprised the other day when you fell down on that acorn? Right? What else did you feel? And then they might be able to tell you that they felt sad or hurt or angry. Or if they're 18 months old and they're not yet telling you how they feel, you're narrating to them how they feel. Okay, so that's tip number 1, use emotional vocabulary when you're describing books or experiences that your children have. Tip number 2 is something called phonological awareness. So phonological awareness is playing with sounds. It's the ability to pull apart sounds of a word. So for example, cat has 3 sounds in it, k, a, t, right? And so as we are learning to read, we are trying to figure out this code of reading and what the sounds are and how they go to these squiggly lines that I see on a page, right? Otherwise known as letters. When we do that, we're actually having to hold these sounds in our brain, pull them apart, separate them, and squish them together to help them form this code known as language, right? So when I squish k, a, t together, I get cat, right? So the early stages of this have nothing to do with connecting to the letters on the page and everything to do with playing with sound. So we do this really early on with kids when we're doing rhyming. And rhyming is this ability to hold on to the word, separate the first sound from the second sound, right? So again, if we use, let's say bat, right? If we said bat, separate the first sound from the second sound, at, oh, okay. And then drop that first sound off, no more and add another word, or another sound, let's say f. So at, hey, bat and fat rhyme, right? So that idea of being able to identify sounds, pull them apart, and push them together, that actually is our number 1 predictor of the ability to read fluently in 3rd grade. And then we know that that helps throughout school. So what do you do when you're playing with phonological awareness? You can do rhymes. Any song that has rhymes, any book that has rhymes. When you use a book or a song that has rhymes, start trying to trick your kids. So read the first part, like, the cat sat on the bat. And then the next time you read it, you say, the cat sat on the, and you wait for your kiddos. And if they can fill it in, they're starting to develop that sound and that concept of rhyming and pushing and pulling together. Other thing that you can do is just play with sounds and just play with the beginning of a sound. So if you're in line, I actually do this in line at Starbucks all the time, and we do, oh, you want a cake pop? right? And just starting to kind of help them identify that there is the beginning sound to something and that it can be repeated. Third tip, home language. If your child is exposed to any language other than English, it is critical that they continue to get exposed to that language. So we know that the number of words that you know in your home language, so for example, my mom's first language was Spanish. So her home language is Spanish. She learned English as a 5-year-old. And it was critically important that she continue to be exposed to Spanish because the number of words she knows in Spanish will absolutely increase the number of words that she knows in English. And when we talk about vocabulary, all the way back to tip number 1, the variety of vocabulary that you know in your home language directly crosses over to that variety of vocabulary that you know in your second language. So, for example, for my mom, if her mom had stopped speaking Spanish to her, she would have stopped learning that variety of vocabulary, and it would have been harder for her to develop that vocabulary in English. So tip number 3 is if you are with any child, whether it be the child in your preschool or the child in your neighborhood that speaks a language other than English, support that home language. You can learn a couple words in it so that they see it valued. Or if you happen to speak that language, share songs with them, read stories to them, and just speak to them using all different types of vocabulary in that home language. Okay. Thank you for watching our Reading Tip Series Edition 2. So just remember that language is an incredibly important part of reading and that you have the power to shift it.